One of the most daunting tasks of getting started with standards-based grading is getting a functional gradebook. I'm going to show you how to do that with pivot tables right now. Pivot tables are a powerful tool in Microsoft Excel that can congregate information from different spreadsheets or different tables and bring them together as one, which is great for what we're wanting to do with standards-based grading. I want to remind you this is part of a series of videos on getting started with standards-based grading because my motivation is just I want to help people get started with setting up a standards-based grading course. You can find links to those videos in the description of this video, as well as links to resources that can help you with all sorts of aspects of standards-based grading. The challenge of keeping up with grades with standards-based grading is that most LMSs don't really function well with the structure of what we're trying to do with standards-based grading. So what I do is I keep up with a grade ledger using Microsoft Excel. I use pivot tables to bring that information together to actually start getting a grade. But as I detailed in my previous video, I go through several rounds of recoding to turn that table of information more into a GPA style grade. So I want to include some sort of grade recoding. I do that all in Microsoft Excel as well. And then from there, I am ready to do a mail merge through Microsoft Word where I can send this grade report to students where they can keep up with it, even if the LMS is being a little finicky. I'm going to walk you through all of these steps today on how to set up your gradebook like this. I also want to point you to the video series by Tom Mahoney on setting up gradebooks through pivot tables. The description of that series is in the description as well, and he has some details that I might not include because I'm focusing more on the way I set up my course. But if you need something different, you might want to look there. Okay, so let's build a gradebook. We're here in Excel. I have a blank document. The strategy is I want to set up a roster, and then I want to set up my ledger, and then we're going to use pivot tables to bring those together in a meaningful way. So the first thing I need to do is build a roster, and I need some headings. So I'm going to use key, last name, first name, email. The email is really important here. The key is what's going to help us match what I have in the table here to what's in the ledger. So I might have a student named Barkey, Ben Barkey, and with the email, I don't know, barkey at email.com, and then I'll just fill out the rest of the roster from there. What will be useful here is to make a lot of this information into tables. So just highlight your information, your roster, and go to the Insert tab, Table. I do have headers, so there it is. There's my roster listed as a table, and I'm going to come down where it says Sheet 1 and rename this as Roster. And now I'm going to open up a new tab, which you can do with the plus sign here, and this is going to be my ledger, which I'll go ahead and rename as Ledger. Now my ledger is just going to be a way for me to document my assignments as I grade them. So I'm going to need some headings for that as well. I'm going to use name, date for the date of the assignment. I'm going to use the target heading to classify which target the student is attempting. We can have a score. I might need a version for whatever assessment this was. And I like to have a comment on there as well. So, for example, let me go to my roster. I'll copy my roster in. And it could be, if I hit Control semicolon, it gives today's date. So it could be that today these students took the A1 quiz, and that was quiz A11, which is how I labeled them. Obviously, you can do that how you want. I'm going to highlight and scroll down and then hit Control D to just copy all that information. And then I can just put in the score. So Barkey did okay, Boxer did not, Highland, Honk, etc. All right, so there are the student scores. Now what I'd like to do is make this a table as well. So I'm going to highlight this information. Go to Insert, Table. My table has headers again. Okay, now from here, next time Barkey takes an assignment, or let's say Boxer comes by later and wants to take that quiz again. So this might be the A12 quiz, and this time they got it right. Okay, or let's say that maybe Pug had a check minus and they brought it to me and corrected it in class. So I might update that to 1. I usually leave a comment corrected, and so I can go back and see kind of how many check minuses someone's accumulating. Alright, so now I have my ledger, and I have my roster, what I'd like to do is bring those together to actually get my table. So you go to Insert, Pivot Table, just hit OK. It's going to open up a new worksheet as a tab, and we're actually not going to use this tab. You'll notice on the right side here, there's this menu that helps set up your pivot table, and there's a More Tables option because we're going to need both tables, not just one. So I hit Yes, and it creates a new tab. They call it Sheet 4. So I'm going to go ahead and delete Sheet 3 because we won't use that. Sheet 4, though, we are going to build our pivot table, and you can see tables 1 and 2 here. Okay, now what we want is in the rows, we want information from table 1. I usually like to have my last names, and you can just drag these in, then my first name, and I would like to have my email as well. And the reason I'm including all this information is because whatever is aligned in my pivot table, I will be able to put into my mail merge later on. In my columns, I would like to have my targets. So I'm going to put targets across the top. And you know there's this, we have a little bit of a table now, but there's nothing in it. So what I want to do is down in this sum values box in the bottom right, I'm going to drop score. And now when I do that, this is not correct because this is 9s. That's not what we should have. You notice that there's a yellow box here that says they're trying to establish some sort of relationship. So I'll hit create. And now this is where I show Excel how to match my two tables together. So from table 1, that's my roster, I want the key to match from table 2 what I'm calling name. Because if you notice in my ledger, I was putting in the keys from the roster as my names. The reason I do it that way is if I have students with the same last name, they can have different keys, and it keeps their grades sorted. All right, so when I hit OK, this looks more like what I was hoping to get. Okay. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop score in again, and so it's summing again, so it's repetitive, but if I click the drop down arrow by sum of score, I can go to value field settings, and I actually want to change this to account, and I'm going to call this attempts. So this will be the number of attempts for each target a student has, which is information I want to keep up with as well. So hit OK. And then it's not as obvious now, but just trust me on this. You want to trade places the sigma and the target. That'll sort all the sums first and then all the attempts second. If you have it the other way around, it'll have for each target sum attempt, sum attempt, sum attempt. That's hard to keep up with. All right, now a few aesthetic things. If you go to the design tab at the top, I want to report layout tabular form. Okay. I don't usually like the email column showing up when I'm actually doing things, so I'm going to right click that column and hit hide. And then one other thing is you notice these little minus boxes, which is okay, but it's just kind of annoying. I'm going to right click, go to pivot table options, display, unclick show expand collapse buttons. I'm going to hit OK there. Those go away as well. All right, so now we have the beginnings of a pivot table, and I'm going to go ahead and rename this tab grades. A couple of things I like to do. So I'm going to copy everybody's name. I use tokens. You can use tokens with your pivot table just by adding in token as the target. So everybody starts with 2 tokens. So at the beginning of the semester, at the top, I always put this information in for everybody. If you notice here, it looks kind of weird, like these are all blue and they shouldn't be. What that tells me then is I have some filling going on. So if that happens to you, just go up to your fill option here and click no fill, and then it'll look like the rest of your table as you would hope. Okay. So now I have some tokens. If I go to my grades, notice the tokens don't show up there. I need to recalculate my data. So I go to the data tab and I can hit refresh all, and then now it brings in my tokens. Okay, so over time throughout the semester, you're going to have more and more assessments. So you just put them into your ledger, as I have done here. These are fake grades with fake students, okay? I just wanted to give you an idea of what this will look like. And once I hit refresh all, I can go to my grade section. And you can see this table filled out in more detail. I have all these different targets. I can also include here the number of tokens people have, the final exam score. I can also include homework etc. All right, so speaking of homework, where do I include that information? So depending on how your course is set up, this particular gradebook is set up like a Calculus 2 course. I'm going to add in a few extra columns at the beginning. All right, so I added in these blank columns. It seems like a lot. But what I want to do is I'm going to have their letter grade posted in this first column. And again, a lot of this is information for the grade report, but it's also helpful for me as well. This is going to be their B target grade, a complimentary target grade here. This will be their final, their one check. I want the homework grade here, and I actually do want one more. So I'll let that be homework, and this would be homework submission. I like to have a count of how much homework they've counted. Now this is not actually part of my pivot table, but this will be useful information that I can put into their mail merge document. And you can shrink these columns to kind of conserve some space as you want. Now, what else are you going to need? I need a place for homework, so I'm going to copy the roster. I'm going to drop down 2 spots below this initial table. I'm going to paste the roster in right there. I also want to be able to convert all of this according to the table I have in the syllabus. So for example, for B targets, they may need to hit 80% of their B targets to get an A. All right, so I need to somehow be able to codify that information as well. I'm going to paste the roster again here. I'm going to drop down 2 more, paste the roster again. This will be for recoding those percentages into a letter. And then finally, I'm going to paste it one more time. This will be recoding those letters into a GPA scale. All right, so let me add some headers. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I've made a table here where I have a heading for homework submissions, homework completions, and then this is kind of what you might see in a typical gradebook with all the homework assignments, and then ones or zeros, either they checked it off or they didn't. If I did a count, I would have 21 total assignments that I put in this spot here at G23. And I want to keep up with how many homework assignments each student is completing. So I'm going to do that with the Excel function equals count. In this case, it would be M23, scrolling over to AG23. Okay, now since it's in a table, when I hit enter, this will apply to all my students. So for the homework completion, I'm going to use the COUNTIF function. COUNTIF will allow me to count something if it meets certain standards. So I'm going to have M23 to AG23, the same block of information. Then I'm going to put comma, and the statement I want is greater than 0. So this is going to count the number of homework assignments that they've successfully completed, not just submitted. So I'm going to hit that button. Now I can make this a percentage by dividing by the 21 here. If I want to build this function where I can change 21 and then it automatically updates my information, the way I do that is referencing that cell. I'm going to say $G23. The reason I put dollar signs around it is because that will fix G23 for every single cell in my table. So here are their homework percentages. So I go to my ledger, I copy the roster, I paste in the roster, and I want to make this the homework target. Okay, and I can bring in this information just by saying equals, going to my grade section, and hitting homework completion. And then I can obviously toggle down, and there's everybody's homework grade. So I might say in the comment, homework grade. So then when I go to the grades tab and I update my data, I'll now have a homework percentage included in that table. Now we're going to fill in percentages into my percentage table, and this is broken up by the targets. Now the easiest one will be the homework, right? Because we have our homework completion percentage. I can just say equals L23. That fills out everybody's homework percentage. Okay, now how about the others? Okay, so for B targets, I need to use the COUNTIF function, and I need to decide if all the B targets have a score of 2 or higher. And so I locate my B targets that I know from my class. The B target categories include the A's, that stands for application, the INs, that stands for integration. This is a Calculus 2 course. And then the T's is the techniques of integration. Okay, so for my B category then, to get these as a percentage, I'm going to say equals COUNTIF. Oh, actually, I'm going to say equals, I want to open and close some parentheses, because I'm going to have to make several COUNTIF statements. The first one will be K6 through R6. I need to count if that is going to be greater than 1. And then I'm going to make another COUNTIF statement starting with W and ending all the way in AI. So I'm going to say COUNTIF W6 to AI6 is greater than 1. And then I'm going to divide all of that by, because I'm turning it into a percentage, the count of K6 through R6 and then W6 through AI6. And so the count statement itself doesn't need to be split up, but because the COUNTIF requires an interval with a logic statement, it doesn't work the same way. And so there I have percentages for my B targets. I could do the same thing with my others as well. So to calculate the one check, what I do is I go to the B target column, I copy this statement except for the equal sign, make sure you hit enter. Then you go to the one check column, hit equal sign, paste it in, and I change these ones to zeros, hit enter, and there is my one check grade. Now, if you have different categories you want to include in the one check grade like I do in Calculus 1, you need to make sure that you add those additional intervals of the gradebook in there as well. So for C target, since it's just based on the total of points that they accumulate over these rubrics for these projects, I'm going to have equals sum instead of COUNTIF, and that will go from S6 to U6, and I divide by the total points possible, which was 10, and so there I have my C target grades. And then for the final exam, all I have to do is reference the appropriate cell, and I label my final as Z final, so it puts it all the way at the end, and I don't have to worry about readjusting all my formulas at the end for everything else. Okay, so there are my final exam grades. So there are the percentages, which is what if you're just doing a traditional grading system, may be enough. Okay, now I'm going to recode these grades into letters, and this is very personal based on your syllabus and how you set this up, and what you count as an A or not. So for my Calculus 2 syllabus, I have to get an A on the B targets, you need to have an 86% or higher. And then it goes down from there. So the way I code that in to Excel is with nestled if-then statements. And if you've never done this before, it can be a little weird, okay? I'm going to use the if-then statement, and notice Excel says you want a logic test, then you put what's going to happen if it's true, and then what's going to happen if it's false. So for example, in this case, if the value of K38 is greater than equal to 0.86, I want to award an A. Otherwise, what's going to happen? I'm going to use another if-then statement. Now, my recommendation is to close with a parenthesis to start this again. So if K38 is greater than equal to the next value that I had in the syllabus, which I think was 76%, I'm going to include that as a B. And make sure you close that if-then statement. And then, if it's not that, what's going to happen? I'm just going to tier down to my C and D. So referencing the syllabus, C is 71%, D is 61%. So I can say if K38 is greater than or equal to 0.71, I get the value of a C. If not, I need to do one more. K38 is greater than or equal to 0.61, you get a D. Otherwise, you get an F in that category. And it appeared to work. Okay, so there are my recodings there. I can do similar things for each one of these. What I recommend doing is opening up a notepad text file and dropping a copied version of that if-then statement into the notepad. It's easier to correct in the notepad and then copy and paste it into Excel than actually just type them all in Excel. So once I get one working, I usually copy and paste from Notepad in here, and I have a notepad with similar logic statements provided. You can find a link to those in the description of this video. Okay, I'm not going to worry about setting up the other grades for these sections. I'm just going to copy and paste what I have here just by dragging my box just to get some information. Okay, but in real life, you would want to tailor these based on different grade categories. And that essentially is why you have to do this, is because I wanted each grade category to have different standards to qualify for different A's and B's, etc. All right, so the last part of this is I need to now recode these into a number again. I went from percentages to letters back to numbers, and these numbers are going to be based on a GPA scale. And that GPA scale is essentially what we know. If K53 is an A, we'll give it a 4. If it's a B, we give it a 3. If it's a C, give it a 2. If it's a D, give it a 1. Otherwise, give it a 0. All right, so there are those GPA values, and then I can just, for my mock situation, I'll just drag across to fill out this information. And this is a safe formula just to drag across all your table as well, because the GPA recoding stays the same. Now what I can do is give an actual grade based on my course weights, and I'll put that information in the GPA column. So for example, you can see here I have the K38, which is the B target grade, is worth 35%. The C target grade is 10%. The final exam is 10%. The one check grade is 10%. My homework is worth 35%. And then I can just drag that down and fill out everybody's GPA grades. Okay. And you know what I'll want to do is recode these back into a letter here. And so the way I do that is, again, with another nestled if-then. I'll have that in the text document as well. And you notice that if G68 is a 3.7 or higher, I count that as an A. If it's a 3.5, we get an A minus, and so on, nestled down. And then I can just drag those down and get that information. And now at the top, I can just reference here for letter. What I want is this recoded grade for the current letter score. For the B targets, I have that information already. That would be right here. For C, it's right next door, as is the final, as is the one check grade and the homework grade. And I can just drag all of those down. And then I like to put in the number of homeworks they have submitted in the grade report. So I can just click that value K23 and drag that down. All right. So finally, we have a full grade book with all the targets. It shows what they've mastered, what they haven't, and we've successfully recoded everything to get these letter grades. Now, it is a tedious process at first, but once you have it, it's very useful. And the only thing you might need to tinker as you go is exactly which columns count as a B target or A target or C target, or however you have that divided. You might also want to adjust the weights on what counts as an A or not, because again, in the beginning of the semester, you're going to have a lot of F's because no one's really had a chance to master much. So if that's the case, I might lower these thresholds, but I keep that information copied in another document so I can just copy and paste it. Another thing you might want to adjust is your weights early on, because for example, the final exam will just be a 0 until the very, very end. So usually I put a 0 weight on the final exam and bump up homework or one check or the B target grade in this example in terms of their weights to account for that. And I always make sure they understand that this is an estimated grade. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is how to turn that into a mail merge document. And once I have this information, it's pretty easy. So I'm going to highlight the table of the information that I want to include, including the attempts. I like to have the attempts included. Now I go to the Formulas tab, click Define Name, and what I'm doing is making this basically a database that I can pull from later. So I'm going to say Testing Cal 2. Now I'm going to open up my Word mail merge of a document that looks like this, and I will include this document. You can find that in the link below as well. I'm going to go to the Mailings tab, click Select Recipients, use an existing list. You have to locate your list. So you do that by finding your spreadsheet, and when I open it up, it has these databases. There's my Testing Cal 2. And now I'm able to put in merge fields however I want. So for example, here's my IN1 score. Here is IN1 attempts. I can put in, since I put in those grades at the beginning, I can put in my beat target grade. Here's my final exam grade. Here I like to put in the letter grade, and I usually add in, this is an estimate. I can put in a note that says whatever I want. This week we have a quiz. This week we have a quiz on A2 or something like that. I can put in any of that information that I want. I can put in the tokens they have available, the homework they have completed or submitted, the homework they have completed. I can add in all those merge fields, and then I can hit preview, and it'll show here's Ben Barkey's information. He has a B- estimate, a homework grade of a B. Here's the IN score with the number of attempts, and if I had filled out everything else, it would be there as well. And then to finally mail it, I just click Finish Merge, Send Email, put in a subject line, HTML, hit OK. Now on my computer, my laptop, I have to open up Outlook separately for this to work. You might have to do that if you're on your work desktop, it may not matter. But you hit OK, and it'll just, boom, mail out all of those grade reports to your students. Okay, this is a very technical video, a lot of information. I hope it's helpful. You can do it, and once you have it, it's very, very powerful, very useful. All right, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and thanks for watching.